live streaming now. Sorry about that.
Thank you for doing that. Hello, everyone. This is, I'm calling to action the Climate Action Plan Committee for August 17th, 2026. My name is Mickey Varney, and I'm the chair of the committee, and the members present. Please introduce yourselves.
Shane Matthews.
Paul Tigan, Ward 1.
Thank you for being there, and I think Councillor Nordyke may be showing up in just a little bit. Okay, and city staff, could you just go around the room and introduce yourselves so people know who's here?
Yeah, Jason Pulley, Assistant Director.
Brian Martin, Public Works Director.
Janelle Valdez, Staff Assistant.
Juliana Douglas, Climate Action Plan Manager.
Meredith Greer, Natural Resources Planning Manager.
Krishna Namburi, the City Manager.
Thank you all very much. Well, first, we need to approve our minutes from our June 15th, 2026 meeting. Can I have a motion?
Move to approve our minutes.
Second.
Second by Tigan. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. The minutes are approved. I don't believe we have anybody signed up for public comment. Is there anybody online?
There's nobody online. There was a written public comment that was sent just a little bit ago.
Okay. Thank you very much. So that is in the record. So we're moving very quickly here. So on to our action and or discussion items. First is councilors' updates. And since I wanted to bring this forward because I wanted to talk about a couple of committees that I have been working on that are directly related to what we do with the Climate Action Plan Committee. But first of all, I wanted to ask Climate Action Plan Manager Juliana to kind of introduce ICLEI.
Yeah, of course.
Okay,
So
okay.
ICLEI is Local Governments for Sustainability. They used to go by a long acronym that they shortened to ICLEI, but they don't use that anymore. It was International Council for Local Governments on Environmental Initiatives, but now it's just ICLEI. So that's where the kind of odd name comes from. They are mostly used as a software tool for modeling our greenhouse gas emissions for communities across the nation and the world. Actually, they use this tool called ClearPath. It's the gold standard for modeling. They also have technical expertise on emissions reduction. So they are the people that we go to if we're like, hey, we are seeing this weird blip in this section of our emissions inventory. What can we do? And they help with working to address that. They also have cohorts to address unique and emerging issues. So we are in their capital cities clean energy collaborative cohort, and that is where Councillor Varney first got involved. They were asking for an elected official and for a staff member to come on this because capital cities provide a unique intersection of where actions are feasible and actions can motivate others. So it helps with providing a template for entire state governments. So there was and most of their funding is through philanthropies. So there was a philanthropy that wanted to pilot this initiative, and that's where that program funding came from. And that's kind of the direction for that. In that collaborative, we are in the budgeting, financing, and staffing cohort, as well as the energy efficiency and government operations cohort. They provide mostly networking, advocacy, or diplomacy, depending on where that is needed, as well as tools for reaching emissions reduction.
So it sounds like they kind of facilitate cities to do actions and certain initiatives, right? Okay. Well, I asked, because of our city's relationship with ICLEI, in February this year, 2026, the Federation of American Scientists launched the Center for Regulatory Ingenuity. otherwise known, I'll refer to it as CRI. And I know it sounds like a huge thing, but think Center for Regulatory Ingenuity. The reason that, and this is a national advisory council that will take the experience of community leaders from around the US, basically a lot of them from capital cities, and take their work, it's to provide a place for us. There are about 20 of us on this council. It's a place for us to get together and discuss what has been working with our climate action plans, what hasn't been working, what some of the barriers are. And so the purpose of this National Advisory Council is actually to make recommendations for lobbying for new federal legislation around 3 primary policy areas. One is climate and energy policy execution. Another one is multimodal transportation and identify the bottlenecks and things we can do to help move that forward. And the last one is equitable housing and regulatory trade-offs. So those are the 3 areas we're focusing on. So we get together, I and mayors and administrators, and we review materials, and we just started actually. We've had just a couple of meetings, but we're gonna make recommendations that reflect the on-the-ground reality in communities, what we're seeing, and as I said, what some of those barriers are. So ideas for white papers, and as I said, legislation. We provide feedback on draft policy materials, and we're brainstorming topics for future white papers on policy and governance solutions from a local government perspective. So that's one of them. And then the other committee that I'm serving on, it's a 2-year term, which started in March of this year, and it is the League of Oregon Cities Energy and Environment Policy Committee. So I am one of 2 representatives for our region number 3, and there are actually about 20 folks on this committee from around the state, representing cities from all over the state. Our tasks are to review and make and recommend changes and updates to the Oregon municipal policy, and also create 3 to 5 legislative priorities the League of Oregon Cities should focus on in the 2027 and 2028 Oregon legislative sessions. And so if you're wondering what kind of topics we talk about, I just listed a few of them. Energy conservation and efficiency, industrial energy usage, regulation and development, and yes, discussions on data centers, renewable energy generation, small nuclear reactors, hydropower, clean energy, economic development programs. Another area is utilities, like gas utilities, franchise fee management and right-of-way, solid and hazardous waste management, which ties, we've had some discussions. We're meeting once a month. We've had some discussions about some challenges with implementing the Recycling Modernization Act. There's been some pushback from the providers. Another area, air quality, and then energy transmission corridors, because that's a huge issue. And Representative Gamba came and talked to us about transmission corridor challenges and how we're going to avoid blackouts. So those are the sort of things that we discuss, and we drafted a policy document, which I can share with folks if you'd like. Yeah, it's interesting, and it's also interesting how these 2 committees tie together a bit. So I just wanted to provide an update of something I've been doing this spring.
That's great.
Any questions? Yes. Councilor
Yeah.
Tiger.
Yeah, Councilor Varney, thanks for the update. I was able to spend just a afternoon, evening with folks from ICLEI last year during the Climate Week New York City in last August, and really appreciated the time I spent with them and the other members. And so it seems like a really great organization to connect with. I am just curious or excited to see the work of that committee, the work of the League of Oregon Cities. I'm not on City of Salem's legislative committee, but it feels like there's a Venn diagram there, right? Where some of those things could come into consideration by the legislative committee for the whole city to pick up. And so just encourage you there to, you know, do what you can to keep the lessons flowing from the national to the state all the way down to our level.
Definitely, definitely. And then on July 15th, kind of a last minute emergency meeting was called regarding the nuclear power generation feasibility study that'll be coming up in the legislature. And the bill form, I mean, right now in our state, we have a moratorium on nuclear energy reactors. But this meeting was called to get feedback from the cities, the individual cities, as to whether they wanted the League of Oregon Cities lobbyists to support a feasibility study or not. And so I did reach out to the legislative committee, and they're not meeting till this month, toward the end of this month or whatever, to get some feedback. So when I was at the committee meeting, when we were talking about it, I just told them that I couldn't, Salem was neutral at this point because I didn't have any guidelines from the legislative committee. So yes, I'm keeping the legislative committee in mind as we do this.
Great.
Okay, thanks. Oh, next, climate action plan updates. I'm so excited about all these. Oh my gosh. Goodness. Huh?
Emerald Ash Borer.
Oh. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. Thank you. I just jumped ahead. I'm so excited thinking about energy and environment. Emerald ash borer is next. Just jump through it.
I'm on board with it.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. Again, I'm Meredith Greer. I'm the Natural Resources Planning Manager. And even though we scheduled this, I think a couple of months ago, I'm hoping that this is a little bit top of mind as Emerald Ash Borer has been in the news more recently, as we're finding it here in Salem. And so this is going to be a quick kind of overview, quick-ish. It'll probably be about 20 minutes. But of our Emerald Ash Borer Readiness and Response Plan, as well as some information about what we're finding so far. So a little bit of background. Emerald ash borer is an invasive and highly destructive wood-boring beetle. It's native to parts of Asia, but ended up coming to the US where our ash trees don't have any natural kind of resistance to them. And so it's really become the most destructive forest pest species in North American history. It's really destructive because the beetles will end up laying their eggs on the bark of ash trees, their larvae will burrow in, and then it'll end up eating back and forth, pretty much destroying the tree's ability to pass nutrients and water up and down the trunk, ultimately killing it. A little bit of a history about EAB. In general, especially here in Oregon, they have about a 1-year life cycle. And so when we're thinking about managing pests, that means that we have a really short window to be able to do anything. When something's able to lay hundreds of eggs and have them all hatch and have new adults fly out, that's really, really challenging. Here in Oregon, we tend to get our adults about summertime. So usually between May and June, the adults are pupating, they're coming out and they're moving around in different places. Talk a little bit more, but those are generally the times of year during the summer that we check to try and find if we can figure out if we have adult EAB here. Throughout the rest of the year, you're not likely going to see anything. The larvae are going to be inside the trees. For the most part, we won't know much about them till they hatch again. Now, the one benefit of emerald ash borer is that they do attack mostly just ash trees. So when we're thinking about pests, it is at least helpful to know these are the trees that we're looking for. In general, there are a couple of common signs that we're looking for when we're thinking about ash tree. Really, it's the type of leaves, the pinnately compounded leaves, as well as some of the opposite branching that really gives them away. Now, in general, there's a bunch of trees, and trees can look healthy or sick for a number of different reasons. But when we're looking at our ash trees, we're really looking at a couple of different things when we're thinking about, am I worried about this ash tree from emerald ash borer, or do I think this ash tree has too much water, not enough water, has other things going on with it? So in general, the first thing that we try and look at is the canopy of our ash trees. What does that look like? When we're seeing trees having problem, they're having thinning and dying canopies. In addition, they might start shooting out these things called epicormic sprouts. Now, when I was mentioning that the larvae are going through and they're eating and cutting off the tree's ability to transport nutrients and water, that means that below that section, the tree will try and sprout a new branch. It's not quite sure what's going on, but maybe it can branch out there and start kind of getting those nutrients flowing again. And then the last one is woodpecker damage. In general in Oregon, woodpeckers aren't super interested in our Oregon ash trees, but when we start seeing them doing a thing called flecking, where they'll go and they'll remove some of the bark, or producing little holes, they're doing that generally because there's a good food source under here. Now, all of these things, they can happen for a number of reasons, especially our native Oregon ash. It can look funky, sometimes just because it looks funky. When we start getting a little bit more worried is when we see kind of the next three things. The first one is these bark splits. So in general, we're talking about 6 inches. The bark is splitting, and that's not what trees should generally be doing. We'll also start seeing these serpentine galleries. You can even see them a little bit in this bark split here. That is very distinctive to the larvae of emerald ash borer. They eat back and forth in an S-shaped pattern. And then kind of the ding, 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 we have a serious problem, are these very distinctive D-shaped exit holes. Now, emerald ash borer, while destructive, at least is helpful. We know it's in ash trees. We know that they are the only ones leaving borer holes that look like this in ash trees. And so when we start seeing these things, we know we have an issue. Now, emerald ash borer was kind of first detected in the US all the way back in 2002. Do you think this will play if I start here?
I have it on YouTube if it doesn't. No.
It's okay. Anyway, emerald ash borer started kind of in the Michigan region, likely transported there from wood pallets or packing materials from kind of Northeast Asia. And from there, it tends to spread usually on a county by county level. You'll see one detection and then kind of it'll go like this. Kind of things to know, and this stopped in about 2017 is this screenshot, but we have one spot out here in Colorado that pops up in about 2013. And it spreads a little bit, and then bam, in 2022, we get one in Oregon. This is the first time it was found on the West Coast, and it was likely brought in kind of a similar way, either wood packaging material, or oftentimes you and I might be transporting things like firewood. That's very often how we're getting these pests to spread so quickly, is that people are bringing things with them, that we get a big jump. In general, emerald ash borer kills 95 to 99% of all ash trees. So this is a really, really destructive, heavily impactful thing that will be impacting Salem. Now, when we're thinking Oregon specifically, it was found first in 2022 in Washington County out near Forest Grove. And since then, as we very much expect, it's been growing. Now, this screenshot is from a presentation I did to SPRAB in June. Each one of these pink little dots is a location where emerald ash borer was found. This was June. We went through our summer where adults were out and we were trapping and checking. This is what it looked like yesterday. And something you'll notice is we had a big spread in Washington County. We also had 2 pop up within Salem city limits. So the first detection we got was in South Salem, right along West Fork Pringle Creek. We actually found this in one of our traps. So one of our detection methods is we have these purple prism traps. They're about this big. They're really, really sticky. They act pretty much like fly traps. And the idea is emerald ash borer, for some unknown reason, enjoys the color purple, which is why they're purple. The goal is that they'll come fly and they'll get stuck and we'll end up finding adults. Now, it's kind of a needle in a haystack kind of situation. On average, we're talking about like 5% accurate. So usually we're doing all this to try and see if we have EAB, but we don't think if we haven't found something in our trap that we don't. This time, for the first time, however, we did find an adult, which means that one, that's helpful for our traps to be working, but it also means that we probably have bigger things going on in this area than just one adult beetle. And we were kind of fortunate, if you want to think about it that way, alerted that we also got reports of ash trees having signs and symptoms, like we had gone over earlier, of emerald ash borer actually last week. So last week in Northeast Salem, right near Chepacabana Community College, we got calls to come take a look at some ash trees, and you'll see their ash trees have the distinctive D-shaped exit holes. They have a bark split and an S-shaped gallery. So now we've had 2 confirmed sightings in Salem, 1 confirmed ash trees in general with ash you know, when you're able to see at this kind of level, D-shaped exit holes, that means that the tree is pretty darn infected with emerald ash borer. We think that this population has probably been in this area for about 3 to 4 years already. And we also have a confirmed stadium of an adult down in South Salem. Now, this is kind of, oh no, what are we going to do about this? The good news is that we have been preparing for. We've known it for decades because it's been in the Midwest. That was only a matter of time. We've known since 2022 it's been in Oregon. So we have been planning and preparing. And ultimately, in May this year, we published our Emerald Ash Borer Readiness and Response Plan, which feels good to be ready before we actually had our first sighting. And what I'm hoping is to briefly go over some of that. It's broken into 4 main sections. The first one is an introduction and background. These are all kind of the things that I had just covered, so we're not going to go back over them, but I'll walk through briefly kind of the other 3 sections. The first one is kind of a function and role of stakeholders. Now, in general, not only do we have a number of internal stakeholders, but a number of external stakeholders, because trees are so pervasive throughout Oregon. Yes, Juliana.
Sorry, I just wanted to make note that Counselor Nordyke has joined us online.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. Because we have ash trees just about everywhere, we have street trees that are ash trees, we have ash trees that are along riparian areas on private property. It requires a really, really big response team from across the city, from across pretty much all different departments. We also have to work extensively with our external stakeholders. We're not the only one. Emerald Ash Borer doesn't care about city limits or anything like that. So making sure that we're working tightly with our partners is really, really helpful. When we're thinking about readiness, we're thinking about kind of 3 main things. The first one is detection. So every single year for the last 3 years, we've been hanging out these purple prism traps to try and see, do we have emerald ash borer in the city? We'll end up going out one more time this year in September, checking our traps and taking them down. So it is possible that we'll end up having a couple more detections this year. We're just not sure. In addition, we also work on public engagement. Juliana had dropped off a couple of these kind of little pocket guides. We've been doing a good amount of education about emerald ash borer, both when we're tabling at different events this summer, posting things on our website, as well as our partners are doing similar things. And then the last one, and one of the really important things, is we're not able to respond to emerald ash borer if we don't actually have a good understanding of where our ash trees are in the city. So we've been working really heavily on inventorying. The Urban Forestry Department was fortunate enough to get 5 interns who worked the last kind of fiscal year working extensively on inventorying. This is one of our interns, Grace. She was awesome. They're going out and they're taking information on ash trees. So in the bottom left-hand corner, these are ash trees that we're taking information on in more of our natural areas. This is Minto Brown Island parking lot number 1, just to give you an idea of just how many ash trees we have. In the upper kind of left-hand corner, these are ash trees. The blue ones are ones that we consider street trees. So these are along our right of way. And the green dots are on what we're considering park trees. To give you an idea of, once we have an idea of what we're looking for, we know kind of when we're getting emerald ash borers, we're going out and doing detection. We also then need to think about what we're doing to manage emerald ash borer. In general, we kind of have 4 different options. What are we doing about our ash trees? The first is do nothing. The second is working on removing those trees entirely or deciding to snag them, which is kind of an arborist term where you go and you cut the tree to make sure it's really stable and you leave it, because even dead and dying trees are great habitat, especially in a lot of our natural areas. We can also decide that we're going to either underplant or replant those ash trees. Underplant, such as we have an ash tree here right now, and we want to make sure that growing underneath it are a lot of native tree and shrub species. So when that tree dies, there's something underneath it. Or replant entirely of we've removed an ash tree and we want something in that place because it's a good spot for a tree. And the last one is there are options to treat ash trees to protect them against emerald ash borer. So briefly, I'm going to walk through. We kind of have 3 different types of property that we're considering in the city, and each one of them is going to have a different kind of management approach based on our goals. So the first one is our urban area ash. So we're talking about ash along right-of-ways, along streets, in our developed park stations. The city ends up owning a lot of different property. Our goal here is we're trying to manage the risk of these dead and dying ash trees. We know emerald ash borer is coming. We can't stop it. We can kind of make decisions about how we plan on managing it. As of right now, we know that we have about 4,000 ash trees in these areas. The city have been working on really going through and inventorying these. In general, of all of our known urban trees, This represents about 7% of our trees are ash trees. So that's a pretty good chunk of our current canopy. Right now, the plan is, as much as we possibly can, we are going to be treating good quality trees in order to protect them. This treatment method is that picture you see right here. We're able to drill holes into the base of the tree and inject it with an insecticide. This insecticide, because the larvae of EAB are going and eating the like inner layers of wood, by poisoning them with an insecticide, it kills the larvae. This is about 95% effective. It's a really good option for kind of protecting, especially those big trees where it's going to be really, really expensive to take them out. It's going to take a number of years for us to get back kind of the ecosystem services from shade, from stormwater interception that those trees are already providing. So treating them in the long run every 2 to 3 years is a good financial investment in them. In general, we're able to do that for about $10 per inch diameter at breast height. Now, this is some information based on if we had to contract that work out. Our urban forestry staff actually ended up starting this work last year, working on trees in the northern half of the city. That's because up until this point, we knew that there were outbreaks in Woodburn and Mount Angel, so we figured, let's start in the northern half of the city. They plan on starting next year on the southern half of the city. So we're gonna be injecting about 1,200 ash trees, alternating back and forth between northern and southern half, with the goal of trying to protect them for as long as we possibly can. We were able to do that in-house last year, and based on our kind of estimates, we're able to save about $40,000 by doing it internally with city staff rather than having to contract that work out. Now, this is just what we're planning on doing in urban areas, really focused on removing poor quality ash trees that need to come down, treating high quality ash trees that we want to protect, and replacing any tree that we do end up removing. In natural areas, the response looks a little bit different. So in natural areas, we're talking about areas where the primary purpose is more of natural environment. So we're thinking about some areas of Minto Brown Island Park, Chandler Nature Park, things like that. Our kind of plan and goal there is to manage the risk. So we're a little bit worried about dead and dying ash trees, but we're also trying to work and focus heavily on transitioning these habitats from ash dominated into something new. So in general, this makes up about 450 acres that we have here in the city on city-owned property managed by the city of Salem. Our goal right now is to likely, for the most of them, take a do-nothing approach. We don't have capacity to be able to manage every single ash tree, but we can work really heavily on underplanting. So the goal there is to set the kind of site up well for when that ash tree does end up dying, having things that we want growing, like native trees and shrubs in those areas rather than letting them completely go to invasive species like blackberry or reed canary grass. In addition, there will likely be some removals and snags, and we might end up treating some trees if we think, man, this tree is really high quality, we want to be able to do that. As of right now, we're working on finishing our inventory and creating management plans for a lot of these areas. The last kind of area, and honestly, the majority of the city is in private area. This is all areas not owned or maintained by the city of Salem. And our goal here is mostly to provide property owners with information on here's what you need to know about emerald ash borer. Here's how you identify ash trees. And here are the management options you have. The sooner you're able to start making decisions, the absolute better. So in general, this looks like a lot more community engagement. It looks like press releases, which we had sent out when we first found out about emerald ash borer a couple weeks ago. It looks like putting things in social media. We've had a couple of newsletter articles. We also have print material. And in general, we're doing a lot of this at in-person events, a kind of a good news kind of story related to emerald ash borer. This is actually the booth that Urban Forestry themselves worked at the Inglewood Forest Festival the other weekend on Saturday. We talked to hundreds of people on Saturday, providing them information about EAB. On Sunday, someone that I talked to ended up going and looking at her own ash trees. She made a report to the Oregon Invasive Species Hotline, and last Thursday we went out with staff and that was the confirmed sighting in Northeast Salem. So the good news is that people are learning about this. They're helping us to find these locations because they know their ash trees way better than we do. And so we're going to be continuing doing things like this, and we at least know that it's been successful so far in helping us determine where we have emerald ash borer in the city. The key messages, and I know that was a ton of information, but I'm hoping that something you can take away or let your constituents know, things like that, is ideally to try and work on not moving firewood or any ash material at all. That's how we spread not only emerald ash borer, but other forest pests in general. a general rule of thumb is try and buy firewood within 10 miles of where you plan on burning it. Another thing that we're hoping folks are able to do is to learn if they have ash trees on their properties. If you don't have ash trees on your property, then emerald ash borer will not be a big thing for you to think about. If you do, it's going to be a big deal, and it's going to be a big deal in the next 5 years. In general, it costs about 3 times more for people to have to remove an ash tree once it's already dead. Arborists will not climb ash trees when they're actually have more than 30% of their canopy decline. And so the sooner people are able to know about emerald ash borer, make decisions, the cheaper it can honestly be in the long run. You're also not able to save your ash tree once it's completely infested with emerald ash borer. So if you've decided that this is a tree you want to protect, we have a coworker who ended up just getting her tree injected the other weekend because she decided, I really love this tree in my backyard, I want to save it. Oftentimes that's cheaper to be able to do than removing a big ash tree, but you need to know sooner rather than later to be able to make more decisions and have that ability where you have kind of some flexibility in what you can do. Another thing that we're helping people do is report sightings of emerald ash borer. Whether you think you've seen the bug, which we do have a lot of green bugs in Oregon, and so there are a lot of lookalikes that it might be, but especially if you see some of those signs and symptoms of emerald ash borer, reporting them to the invasive species hotline, which we've got a link down here, as well as a phone number, is the best thing you can possibly do. Some of what we're trying to do while we're taking proactive management steps, we also would love to be able to figure out how big of an area are we talking about that we have infestations? Where are the hot pockets? Things like that. And so the more that people are able to let us know, the better we're able to respond and manage things. And the last thing is that if you know you have an ash tree on your property, making a plan for it. Again, that goes back to the more that you know, the sooner that you're able to plan, the more options are available to you. And our emerald ash borer response plan is all on our website. It lays out a lot of these different things. It provides good information, and we have a number of resources linked there as well for folks to find out more, to get different options, and to learn a ton. There's a lot of work going on pretty much Oregon-wide on this, and so we're hoping that folks are able to learn, reach out to us to get more information, and that we're all going to try and do our best to kind of transition through the next 5 to 10 years where we will end up seeing a pretty darn big impact to our urban canopy. And I know that was a lot, but I'm happy to answer any questions, or this is my contact information if you want to follow up with me later.
Okay, Councillor Tigan has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair and Meredith. Great job. Appreciate all the information. Just one comment on your stakeholder slide. I would recommend all the stakeholders you list there are either your internal stakeholders at Salem or external agencies. And I know you're doing a lot of community engagement. You already have a good community engagement success story, but I would recommend adding the general public and ash tree owners to your stakeholder and think about them as stakeholders as you do this engagement. I think most of the ash trees in the city aren't owned by their cities, as you said, and so they really are probably the biggest stakeholder group because they're going to have to figure out what to do with their ash trees. I anticipate a question, and I'm wondering if you know the answer, which is, if you decide to inject your tree, do you only have to do it for 5 years while these things pass through like a hurricane, or are they now part of our landscape and no ash tree is likely to ever survive ever in this landscape again? And so the decision to do the injections is essentially a biannual commitment for the remainder of the tree's life.
Yeah, that's an absolutely fantastic question. So unfortunately, emerald ash borer is here to stay. We are hoping that there might be some trees. I say that it's 95 to 99% deadly to ash trees. There's that 1% of trees that we have seen in the Midwest and East Coast that end up having some level of genetic resistance and survive. But we don't think that's the majority of them. So folks, if they decide that they're going to treat their ash tree, they are signing up at the very least to doing it every 2 to 3 years for as long as they want to keep their ash tree alive. You know, they could decide to do that through the end of the natural life. They could decide that they're treating for the next 6 years because they want to save up some money to be able to remove their tree. Treating it gives you more time to be able to make decisions. We are hoping, and there are efforts, there have been extensive efforts kind of up and down the Willamette Valley from organizations like Oregon State University to collect ash seeds. The idea being, once emerald ash borer has come through and we see kind of, there's a nomenclature of calling it a death wave, where we'll end up seeing a lot of our ash trees die in about a 5-year period. After that, you can assume that most ash trees around here have had the opportunity for emerald ash borer to infect them. If they haven't, for some reason, if they're not susceptible to that, there might be some level of genetic resistance. So there's hopes that we can go back through, inventory what ash trees have survived, and work from the seed bank that has been established to try and raise, genetically resistant trees to be able to for years. And that emerald ash borer would function a lot like it does in parts of Asia where it's native, where it ends up impacting stressed or dying ash trees like a lot of the other wood borers we have here in Western Oregon, but that doesn't end up decimating all ash trees like it does right now.
I'll just share an aside. I grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I went back through my neighborhood, a very tree dense neighborhood, but it was so dense. The last time like canopy everywhere. This last summer I went back and I talked to my mom and I'm like, Mom, I don't remember growing up in a community that had that thick of canopy. And she recalled on my behalf, essentially told me about how the Dutch elm disease had wiped out St. Paul's canopy, Minneapolis's canopy, way more than the 9% that you say, 7% or whatever it is. And I grew up in a city that had a lot fewer trees in it. And, 30 years later, the canopy had returned. So I've been thinking about that experience a lot with this pest, because we're going to go through a transition and it's going to last decades. We'll bounce back, but it's going to impact a lot of people in the near future.
Any questions?
I just wanted to clarify, so the 4,000 tree projection, that's just what's on city land, and then we don't really have a projection for what's on private land?
No, we don't.
Okay. And then I know at this time, it sounds like most of the trees you said were kind of at a do-nothing stage. What is our budget, or what have we allocated towards treatment? I was doing the math, and if we treated all of them, it looked like it'd be about 1.3 million approximately, so I'm assuming that's not our budget, so what have we allocated toward?
Yeah, so for the most part, urban forestry has been treating trees, the kind of like 1,200 trees that we've identified that are, because not every tree is a good candidate. They need to be a certain size, they need to be of a certain health. And so that kind of group, they've been treating from their urban canopy, just their kind of normal urban forestry budget, moving things around. They do have grant funding right now for 1 more year, but they're planning on using to kind of really ramp up a lot of what they do. For the most part, we're trying and attempting to figure out if this is something that we can fund internally right now, or if it does require an external. Natural Resources Planning has a pot of money that we're using to kind of launch more of a pilot program this fiscal year that's really focused on a couple of 3 main things that we're working on: education outreach, removal of high priority ash trees that are not in a good spot or not in good health, and then kind of helping us to finish our inventory in natural areas, and ideally creating some kind of planting palettes that we can kind of think of when we're underplanting an ash, an area. In a riparian area, here are some things that we should be doing, or in a wetland, here are things that we should be doing, or upland area, because we have ash along all of those things. So we're using that funding now, and then after that, it might be on a case-by-case basis, or just utilizing funds that different groups have internally. There is some level of grant funding that's out there. I know there are organizations that are working with the state to try and increase, can we get more funding to help respond to this, knowing that more and more communities are being impacted, that I think is kind of a little bit a TBD at that point about what we're gonna do.
Last question, I guess I had 2 more. One was, I know with the firewood aspect, once there's firewood that's been cut, right? And I know the premise here is not to try to buy within 10 miles of your home, or where it's gonna be burned, but that's probably pretty difficult in Salem, I've got to assume, to ensure that your source was within 10 miles. Is there a treatment that can be done on the firewood, or is that also not practical in cost?
Yeah, in general, especially if people have ash trees on their property right now that they want to take down, you're more than welcome to take down and buck your trees and turn it into firewood. If you're planning on moving that somewhere else or selling it to your neighbor or your cousin or whatever, we prefer, especially if you keep it on your property for a year. In general, that means that the adults and larvae, they've finished their life cycle and they've exited, they're not gonna be feeding on dead tree, and so that's generally helpful. If you wanna do it sooner than that, there are options like you can purchase from different supermarkets like kiln dried firewood, which means that they've, we've gotten to a certain level of heat that they've killed off pests. I don't know of anybody in Salem that does that for a private landowner though.
But it sounds like as far as our outreach aspect, like for instance, my parents use wood heat as their primary source, and so they purchase cords of wood, they purchase it from the lowest person.
Yeah.
That's right, they're gonna make a financial choice. And so knowing that, it sounds like really the education for them should be is buy something that's been seasoning for a year plus.
Yeah.
Would be kind of the objective, to try to still meet the need of trying not to introduce ash borer in, but still allow them to make a financial decision.
Yeah, and in general, there are quarantines set up by the Oregon Department of Agriculture. They kind of help with some of the movement of pests and things like that. Right now, Marion County, because we found emerald ash borer in there, is within a quarantine with Multnomah, with Washington, with Yamhill and Clackamas counties. And you can technically move firewood within there. We already have emerald ash borer in these areas. Right now, Polk County, so West Salem, because we haven't found it there, is not within the quarantine. There are pretty strict rules, we don't want you driving over the West Salem Bridge. In general, we prefer if people can keep it as local as possible, just to reduce
The risk.
the amount that we're spreading it and as quickly as we're spreading it, but I can totally understand that that's not feasible all the time.
Okay. Councilor Nordike has a question. Councilor Nordike, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, you're just a little bit hard to hear. I heard you that time. Thank you, and I apologize for running a little late, but my staff was busy helping me celebrate my birthday, so sorry, not sorry.
We had a whole celebration set up for you.
Had a little birthday lunchy, which was lovely.
Yeah, you missed the cake we already ate on your birthday. Sorry.
At 35 again. All right. Well, anyway, so I was just thinking and reflecting on how we get the word out, and I was trying to think about who owns the ash trees in this city, right? And I think about there could be a number of commercially owned spaces where they have an ash tree on their property, or some of the houses of worships have beautiful tree, canopy. So I was just trying to think about how you can get the word out. It seems to me that, perhaps the Chamber of Commerce could include it in their newsletter, because either the Chamber of Commerce people have businesses that might have an ash tree planted on it, or they might have a home that has an ash tree planted on it. Another thought I had, there are professional landscapers in the area, and they could offer to their existing customers or new customers, hey, we'll do the ash tree, we'll do the treatments for you as part of our landscaping services we offer. And so I'm thinking about people who can already afford landscaping, who already pay for people to come onto their property to do all kinds of things, perhaps reaching out to the network of local landscapers and such might be an easy way to help spread the word, disseminate the information. And again, I know this probably is not necessary for the do nothing phase. I think I came in right around the time you guys were discussing that, but I'm just trying to brainstorm ways to help you get the word out for our ash tree population. And those are things that came to mind for me.
Absolutely. We do plan on working pretty closely with our landscaping community and arborist community. Those are often the folks that people are calling when they've got an issue. So making sure that those folks are aware of options, of resources, of, requirements from a permitting perspective is really, really helpful. We do also know that ash trees, especially our native Oregon ash, like growing in areas, especially along a lot of our waterways. We, in general, because we've been working really closely with our stormwater group, we have a pretty good idea that there are about 3,000 private property landowners who have backyards that include streams and things like that. We send out mailers every year, and so we plan on really working a lot from that list as well. I've added the Chamber of Commerce as well. Thank you, Councilor Nordike.
Great. The only other thing that occurs to me, we have several colleges in the area that may or may not have ash trees. Willamette, Corbin, Chemeketa, just off the top of my head. So I see you nodding. Perhaps you already have a plan for working with them, but I know they got big property and certainly the potential for ash trees. Thank you.
Sorry.
Counselor Tygan?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
just one quick follow-up. I want to clarify my understanding. The idea that we're in a do nothing phase might be true for the city if they have an ash tree that's could fall and not hurt anyone, like in the middle of a natural area. But what I'm hearing you say is if you have an ash tree in your backyard, this is not a do nothing phase. This is you need to take action right away phase. There's like we're beyond do nothing if you have a ash tree in your on your property.
That's correct. And thank you for that clarification. Yes, the do nothing is the idea in some of our natural areas. Really big landscapes that can take trees falling down that are not going to be a hazard to falling on people, on property, things like that. Our plan is likely to do nothing. As far as most people in your backyard, depending on how big your property is, having an ash tree fall down will be a very big deal. And so that is generally not something that we're recommending for folks on private property, unless you've got the space in order to be able to handle that.
Okay, thank you. I just really wanted to make that part clear, especially in Northeast Salem, in Ward 1. It sounds like where that, or near Ward 1, Ward 5, not a lot of properties that size. So people need to know that if they have an ash tree and they need to do something about it.
Yes.
Thank you.
I had a couple of questions. First of all, thank you for all the information. I mean, I heard it at Sprab and hearing it again. I mean, there's just so much to take in. So I really appreciate it. And the city being so proactive with the readiness and response plan. Okay, so my question is there any financial assistance available for property owners to inject trees? Does the state have any grants or any programs?
The state doesn't currently have one right now. The city of Salem offers streamside properties can apply for the watershed grant. In general, those are things that work pretty well if you and your neighbors all decide that you're going to work on stream restoration or things like that. Managing your ash trees can be one of those things. I will say just on Friday, I had a meeting with representatives from the city of Kaiser, Marion Soil and Water Conservation District, and Polk Soil and Water Conservation District to figure out if there's some kind of grant funding that we'd be able to apply for as a region. Maybe have one of our partners who works really well with private landowners already be able to offer something. Like Marion County right now has a partner grant program where landowners can apply for. There isn't something like that for Polk County at the moment. We're trying to figure out if we'd be able to, through some grant funding, be able to figure out a pot of money that private landowners might be able to utilize. For the most part, in terms of a cost perspective, even from a permitting perspective, we're still encouraging people, please do fill out a tree removal permit for your ash trees, but we're going to waive the fees if you're removing an ash.
Okay. Thinking about injecting trees, does the insecticide kill the beneficial insects too?
So for the most part of the benefit of having an insecticide that you're actually injecting into a tree is that it's only impacting bugs and things like that that are actually feeding on the inside of the wood. For ash trees, that generally is just emerald ash borer. So the non-contact species that come into contact with it is pretty darn low, especially from an insecticide perspective.
Okay, that's helpful. That's helpful. And I just wanted to make the comment, I am not a tree expert, I'm a fish expert. And so I didn't know that mountain ash trees are not true ash trees. And we have mountain ash trees all over and they have all these lovely berries for wildlife, etc. And so I didn't know if anyone had been asking you about those in particular, because we do have a lot.
Yes, I do get a number of questions. In general, when we're talking about emerald ash borer and the species that it attacks ash trees, but one specifically in the Fraxinus family. So mountain ash is not actually one of those. And so I have had a couple of different email conversations with folks saying, I have an ash tree. And when I ask what type and they let me know, I tell them, actually good news. Emerald ash borer is not going to be infecting your trees.
Okay. Yeah, that is good news because I mean, our canopy cover has taken a hit, after the ice storm and now this. And so I'm just glad we're being proactive. We definitely need our trees.
Yeah.
Any other questions? So thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thank you all for your time.
Are you okay if we move to the next item?
Oh, go ahead, go ahead. We're still talking trees. If you're ready, please, go ahead.
Yeah, so Juliana Douglas, Climate Action Plan Manager, and we had some very exciting work that has just recently wrapped up. So on July 25th, we did the Heat Awareness and Resource Fair, and this was in partnership with Marion County. And we had planned on it being combined with our Heat Watch, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We had about 80 to 100 attendees. We distributed 40 cooling kits. We had 11 total booths, and we had a misting tent and a cooling booth. We rescheduled the Heat Watch because we had a cold front. Now, one of the problems with planning out events that are related to weather is that the weather is likely to not coordinate then. So even though we had all of these great items for if we had a heat wave, which was what we were expecting and anticipating back in February when we planned this, it was a balmy 74 degrees in spring. So we had some really cool options in case it got hot. We had a misting tent, and this is a swamp cooler, and it was made to be like very nice and comfortable on a hot day. It was not. So it was unused, but it was a way to show kind of an option for having pavilions if you're having these outdoor events. We also had Chariots came out, and they had their electric bus showing its capacity as performing as a mobile cooling shelter, which if you are unaware, Chariots provides free rides to cooling shelters during when they are activated. So cooling shelters activate at, I believe it's 95 degrees, and we're working on seeing if that's sufficient. But if it gets really hot and you're talking to people who don't know how they can get from point A to a cooling shelter, Chariots can help them out with that. But since we didn't have that on the same day as our Heat Awareness and Resource Fair, we were able to do that on August 8th. And I just wanted to provide a map of the routes where we had folks driving for the air temperature mapping. And in the, let me go ahead and move this guy around. Sorry, Councilor Teigen. So we are trying to create something similar to what happened in Portland metro area, which is the upper right-hand corner map. And so this is showing it all filled in, but they also only did routes. Theirs is a little bit more dense. They had more routes throughout. I believe this is Multnomah County, and ours is going to be a little bit more pockets of maps, partially because we didn't do as many routes, but partially because we have such variable routes. We have routes out in Detroit Lake, Silver Falls State Park, Shampooey. So we're expecting these variances in altitude to not be conducive of making one map, but having a couple of different maps of those pocket areas. And so for this, we had a total of 43 volunteers conducting these 17 routes. And that's after 148 individuals signed up on the interest forms. We were asking a lot from our volunteers. We're asking for them to be all available on a Saturday, starting at 5:30-ish a.m., a little bit earlier if you had to drive out further for one of those routes. Then we needed them to go to the volunteer orientation, which was about an hour, do the knowledge check and get 100% on it. So we knew that we could trust them with these sensitive scientific instruments, and then sign and fill out the waivers and the applications, and then finally being able and available to do that heat mapping on a Saturday. So after all of that, we had about 43 volunteers come through. And I just want to say our volunteers were the most spectacular volunteers. We were very lucky with who we were able to get. And because I want to share with all of you these amazing volunteers, they sent in some photos from their heat watches. So please enjoy. We had all types of volunteers, including a puppy who had a hair appointment. He was able to be brought along on the second route. We had folks that have PhDs in atmospheric science. We had folks who are very involved in CERT. We had some of our partners come out from Willamette University and from Marion County Public Health. We had people bringing some of our friends from different extracurricular activities. We had some wonderful grouse being found out at the locations. And one of our volunteers who wrote in the public comment about the shady area. This was the street that she was like, this is the cool street. Also, a different team that did that same route had been looking for a house, and after driving that route in Northeast Salem, they had gotten very close to an area that had a house go to on the market that day and had an open house that day. And that volunteer put on an offer for that house because he was able to drive near that. And I thought that was really cool. So I'm going to take credit for him getting his dream home. And we also had folks out in Detroit Lake. So they gave us some very, very lovely photos. This here is the heat sensor. So that's the little antenna looking thing. More volunteers, including some of our younger friends who were able to help navigate on this. And then some more good photos out there. So it was, oh yes, and some of the children and grandchildren hopped along for conducting some community science. So it was really phenomenal to have all of these volunteers come out and engage, and they were so excited to be a part of it. So I'm really glad that the way that we approached this project was to involve our community. So what happens now that we have finished gathering this information is we have sent it back to our consultants at CAPA, and the consultants actually worked with NOAA and the NIHIS, the National Integrated Heat Health Information System, and they have created the globally recognized modeling for air temperature heat monitoring models. And so what it's going to look like when we get it back is it's going to show where all the routes were, what had relatively warmer and cooler temperatures, and those are going to be correlated with the different scales. This is a screenshot from a report from Raleigh. So their highs are going to be a lot higher than our highs, and that's totally fine. It's still going to show that variance. So we're going to be looking at the difference between at each of the routes. And so we'll see where is experiencing disproportionate heat burden throughout the day. And so what are we doing while we're waiting for this reporting? Well, first, because we had phenomenal volunteers who every single one of them asked to be involved in more projects like this, they all really enjoyed helping out, and they all really enjoyed getting to be a part of our climate action plan. So we want to do a data release party or something like that to involve the volunteers first and show them what we found from their assistance. And then we'd also like to be really meaningful on continuous engagement for these volunteers and what we can have them be mobilized for next, pun intended. And we also want to review the report with our partners at Marion County Public Health, but also with NOAA and the National Weather Service. They can help us identify if we have, I was going to say hot pockets, but that's not what I want to say. If we have, hotspots also doesn't work. If we have just areas that are experiencing disproportionate heat that we can't naturally explain. So if it's not from something based on like it's on a black asphalt or something like that. There were some rural areas in Multnomah County's heat mapping that they couldn't explain easily. And so we'll make sure to engage the National Weather Service and see if there's something else that might be happening there. And then we want to communicate the results. So when we see this, what it means for individuals doesn't just mean when I'm outside, I will be hotter. If we are looking at areas that are experiencing disproportionate heat impact, it also means that their average energy bills are going to be a lot higher. And so if we're talking about how community resilience can look, it would look like there being less energy costs, there being a more reliable grid because people don't have to spend as much to cool their homes. So we'll be looking at how we can communicate where is experiencing that and what are some solutions for mitigating that heat. We also want to integrate this report because it's just data that we can use to better plan. So we want to use it for community forestry strategic plan update. We want to use it for the our parks plans update. We want to use it for risk management because we have staff that's going out into the community and we want to do our best to ensure that they aren't experiencing disproportionate heat burden. And then we also want to work on our public health resilience planning, and that would be in partnership with Marion County. And every time I talk about this, we get more ideas of how else we can use it. So certainly interested in seeing what it looks like and what we can do with that. And honestly, this would not have been possible without all of our many partners to work on this. So first and foremost, our volunteers, Marion County Public Health, Willamette University Environmental Science and Public Health. We also had help from our National Weather Service forecasters and NOAA, ROCC or Recovery Outreach Community Center. And I actually have them pictured here. They had all kinds of things to give away for preparing for heat resilience. We also worked really closely with Chariots and will continue to do so. They have heat resilience as part of their strategic planning as well, and Northwest Human Services. So any questions on the Heat Watch campaign or the Heat Awareness and Resource Fair? We're expecting the report to come back sometime in November.
Councillor Tigan?
Yeah, thanks, Juliana. I'm sure it's just recency bias, but it sure seems like if we're going to lose maybe 10% of the city's tree canopy in the next 5 years, there could be some useful, geospatial relationships between the heat that's being mapped, the loss of trees, and where we need to invest in keeping the trees, like tree treatment, as well as underplanting for trees that can't be saved. Like the connection seems really clear to me. So.
I love that you pointed that out because that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have Meredith's EAB presentation today. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, and one thing that Juliana had mentioned and how we're planning on using this data is for updating our community forestry strategic plan. So this is a plan that was created in 2013 to take a look at citywide canopy. It hasn't been updated since then. Knowing what we know now about EAB, impacts to the ice storm, all of those kind of things are kind of requiring us to take a little bit of a deeper look at our canopy and figuring out how it connects with the data that Juliana's connecting and things like that. And so we're planning on updating that in the next years, utilizing all of this information to really take a look and create a much more actionable plan for, okay, what does canopy look like in different neighborhoods? What should it look like? Where are opportunities and how can we actually make something that's actionable in the short term to meet the goals of our community?
Yeah, that's awesome. I just imagine there's going to be places of disproportionate loss and that they're going to lead to impacts of heat just like this.
And in part of this Heat Watch campaign, our partners at Willamette University did a co-study using a little bit less expensive sensors. And so we'll hopefully be able to replicate doing check-ins instead of having to do the whole mapping again. But we can look at areas that we've done either interventions or we expect there to be a significant change from the initial heat mapping.
I just had a question about CAPA. Will they be looking at utilizing satellite photos of our tree canopy cover in their analysis, et cetera? Okay.
That's one of the main pieces. They look at the different landscaping and coverage of the routes. And when we were creating the routes, we went through and each of them covered different types of landscaping. So we have a route that goes through a golf course. And that really shows like kind of hyper exaggerated, but what the traditional lawn is supposed to look like. And so we have that, and we have highly forested areas. And we have it going close to Minto Brown Park. And we have like different areas that just have a lot of like street tree coverage. And then we have the canopies all the way up in the mountains, including in Detroit Lake, where we have some areas that it mapped where there was wildfire. So we can see how wildfire impacts heat. So we're looking at all types of those different things, and the routes were very intentionally selected for their tree canopy.
Wow, thank you. That's fantastic. See any other questions?
Okay, the next thing I am very excited to update you all on is our Youth Climate Action Fund. So again, we were awarded $50,000 from the Bloomberg philanthropies, and this is for micro grants to give to youth to have them engage both in government and have them kind of mobilized around that, but also to engage in climate action work. And so this is for what we're calling youth, but it is for folks that are 15 to 24. And so the more responsible end of the youth category. And we're working with them to make a difference in the community. And so we have on our webpage a way that you can submit a interest form to be notified of updates, as well as we have our information for our upcoming co-design session, which is going to be on September 15th at 4:30, and we're going to have that virtually. And then we also have, we're going to be doing office hours. So it'll be kind of an open Teams link for folks to drop in and ask questions. And then they can, of course, contact me if they have like a specific question that is easily emailable. But if not, we know that this is kind of a big project. And so sometimes having someone to talk things through with might be a little bit more appreciated. And so we're going to be opening this possibly by the end of the day, but definitely by tomorrow, and it'll be closing September 30th. So that gives folks a little over 6 weeks to complete those applications. And we also are working with mentors, so different folks within the city that can help with just guiding people through their projects. We're looking at these projects to be around 5 months. And because they're between $1,000 and $5,000, we're looking at really bite-sized projects. And so one of the things that we learned at the co-design session was these young folks have such ambitious and really like memorable project ideas, but sometimes to distill it down to what can be accomplished in that little bit of time for that amount of money, sometimes it just needs some finessing of, you have this idea, here's how we can accomplish that same type of goal, but with these constraints. So that's been really exciting to be a part of. We are going to have that on the same webpage as, or the applications are going to go live on the same webpage that we have the interest form up on. And that's a photo from our first co-design. Any questions on our Youth Climate Action Fund? Oh, also Meredith has been a huge help in this, so big thanks to her.
Can you share a couple of the ideas so far?
Yes, absolutely. So we have some folks that want to be doing stream cleanups, and there was also interest in food gardens, so looking at community gardens and what they can do there. And we also had interests of upcycling musical instruments, so keeping that out of the waste stream and being able to help redistribute to youth that are interested in music, to kind of support the arts as well. So those are a few of them. Meredith, are any others coming to mind for you?
A more organization was really interested in doing some like tree planting and some kind of like canopy work. And then there's a little bit of interest in potential to kind of set up a training or webinar or some kind of series with youth who are Indigenous to provide information on Indigenous practices and things like that for land stewards. And so those were a couple ones that we have heard so far.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I ask a quick question? So for the group that would like to work with the community garden, that kind of a concept, I just kind of want to communicate that I met with the Maiden Pool Food Share CEO, and they actually work with a lot of community members in promoting like those community gardens, and I think they already have a program like that. So if you're going to be granting some money, I think having that kind of a synergy with already a pre-established program probably would be beneficial to this. And even to us, I think, to be, yeah.
Absolutely, and part of this program is the youth can't directly be awarded, so they're required to have a fiscal sponsor. So when they provide us their ideas, we help find if they don't already have those connections, like if they want to do food gardens, if they don't have those connections, we would work in helping get those, because the recipient of the funds has to be a tax exempt organization. So it could be a nonprofit, it could be the city, as long as it's not my division. It can be the county, and it can be the school district. So there's a lot of flexibility in there, but trying to have it aligned with organizations that already know how to do this, obviously there'd be some efficiencies there and some of that expertise. So we are trying to help align those.
Yeah, and we can talk about this offline later, but I do think that there are a lot of nonprofits that are kind of working with youth in general. Punks with Purpose, they're working with homeless youth, and I think we need to be kind of reaching out to these different nonprofits to kind of get the diversity of participation in this program. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I didn't mention that, but that's a great segue. I was working with Ashley and Lori.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And they provided me a very large contact list of folks to engage.
That's great. Thank you.
Questions? Pretty exciting. Oh my gosh.
That is all I have. If we don't have any more questions, people can get out a little bit early, but I'm happy to be here if people do have more questions.
I am not seeing. Thank you so much for that present. I mean, this
Yeah,
is,
all the presentations. Thank you.
yeah, I really appreciate it. Well, since we don't have anything else, our next meeting will be October 19th. Yeah, if you don't have any other stuff, then this meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for being here.